Time now for an in-depth look at the market action this afternoon, and for that, I'm joined on the line by Daniel Yoo, Global Strategist at Yuanta Securities. Mr. Yoo, it's great to have you with us.
Good afternoon.
Well, first of all, over in the U.S., the big three, they did not notch impressive numbers after a record-setting Monday. The dollar was subdued somewhat as inflation weighs on rate outlook, rather. What's your take on the developments thus far?
Yes, if you look at the U.S. market, it continues to do the rising trend. If you look at the S&P 500, it broke the 4,700 territory for the first time. And also NASDAQ index reached above 16,000, but slightly down at the closing, ended going up by 0.07%. All in all, sentiment for the equity market remains to be quite strong. If you look at the inflation pressure, people are concerned about that. And overall, interest rates are kind of timid despite the concern about inflation. So people are concerned about the stiffening of the yield curve. But nevertheless, because of the earnings are very strong and is supporting the equity market current point, where the year-on-year growth rate for third quarter for S&P 500 is coming in at above 39% year-on-year growth rate, which is second highest since the 2008 financial crisis on a quarterly basis. So because of that, plus if you look at the 1 trillion won infrastructure bill that passed, therefore it is pushing up the Dow Jones index by the most. It was going up by about 0.2% or so. So in general, I think that people are cautious about such a high movement in the last several days. In fact, the NASDAQ is up by, for NASDAQ 100, it was up by 10 days in a row until yesterday was slightly down. So overall trend seems to be very positive. I guess that people will be waiting until the news of the possible interest rate hike, which is not going to be happening anytime soon after the tapering is over, and the probably tapering will finish by sometime in June of next year. So I think that we are in a phase where quite modest growth, and market seems to be happy with that kind of trend.
Right, and back here in Indonesia, South Korea continues to, some would say, decouple with the U.S. market, both the benchmark index and the KOSDAQ. What's your analysis of the domestic market for today?
Right. If you look at Korean market at the beginning of today, it was up, and then during the middays it went down, and then finally ended up with a slightly higher overall market. I guess decoupling for Korean market had been very strong in the past 1 month or so, but it's lucky that we are seeing some recovery. KOSPI did ended with a slightly going up by 0.08%. KOSDAQ was up quite nicely to well above 1,000 territory again by 0.62%. Main reason for that recovery is coming from the foreign investors coming back to buy the market, total of about 126 billion won worth. Today, if you look at the Korean won, it was kind of mispriced, but Korean won to US dollar did go up to 1,200 on the numbers, and that's the reason why I think the foreign investors are coming back on the basis of that kind of currency movement. We don't think that there is any reason for Korean won to depreciate that much. In the future, with the US dollar kind of stabilizing, Korean won is most likely to stabilize in the future. At the end of today, Korean won ended at 1178.5. Which is slightly down from the previous peak. Overall, if you look at the earnings number for Korean companies, it remains to be quite nice with a quite strong year-on-year growth rate. However, people are continuing to be concerned about the raw material cost increase, the oil price rise, possibility of slowdown in the semiconductor price and sales. I think that's all about uncertainties, but nevertheless, so far what we see in up to third quarter numbers, Korean market seems to be very strong on a relative basis compared to any other countries in the world.
Right. Bitcoin and Ethereum that continues to scale new heights. Bitcoin's price eclipsing a previous record set last month. Ethereum's blockchains surpassed 4,800. What are some of the key factors fueling these recent rallies?
Right. If you look at the Bitcoin price, it has risen above 67,000 plus, which is the record highest level. And also Ethereum is up to 4,800 plus. which is first time ever. Both of these two cryptocurrencies are rising in a very strong pace. It seems that the Bitcoin-related ETF listing pump up the liquidity into that alternative assets. If you compare what we've seen in terms of overall price changes on market capitalization for all the alternative assets, which includes gold, silver, and the cryptocurrency, so far, since the beginning of the year to now, it has risen by about 8% year-on-year growth rate, which is smaller than what we saw in terms of the M1 growth rate for U.S. U.S. M1 growth rate were at around 16% territories, which means that the value of currency goes down based on more printing of the money, and which means that the demand for the alternative asset rises. So I don't think that it's not unreasonable price, given the fact that the liquidity in the system is so ample. We think that the listing of these ETFs and more of becoming institutionalized investment, that means that we think that there will be more room as the alternative asset demand for the asset management companies are remain to be very strong in the future.
And of course, here in the nation, curiosity was peaking as to how the current real estate policies would impact the market. But with the presidential election looming, candidates will gradually unveil their direction and outline for real estate policies. One key figure is, of course, the Democratic candidate, Lee Jae-myung.
Right. I think that both parties will be talking about how they will try to control the property prices by means of adding additional supply into the system. I think that until the election is over, we don't see much of the supply coming in, resulting into the price drop. But right now, there are a huge amount of the capital gains taxes placed upon all these property capital gains by owners who owns more than 2-3 houses. Obviously, because of that, they're not selling these products or the houses. So therefore, they're still holding on to it until the election is over. So on a very thin volume, the prices are still keep going up. We think that once the election is over, with these kind of huge tax rates, plus the ample supply will be coming in starting sometime next year as the policy moves. Of course, it might take some time for actual property supply to kick in, but nevertheless, if they start to building more properties as the election is over, we think that it's bound for prices decline. On the basis of price-to-income ratio and price-to-rental ratio for Korea, it is one of the highest level of property prices relative to income. So if that's the case, we think that there's probably no reason for property prices to go up except the political reasons that we're facing the presidential election. Once the presidential election is over, we think that property price should start to go down or stabilize, despite that that might cause some of the asset price decline, resulting into some of the uncertainty in domestic demand. Nevertheless, we think that there has been too much bubble that built up to the property prices right now on the basis of political reasons rather than fundamental reasons.
All right, Mr. Daniel Yoo, thank you so much for your insights today. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.